that material relating to the way in which decisions were taken must be retained so that proper lessons could be learned and a better response to the pandemic developed. Is that correct?
That is correct, and perhaps on this issue of informal messaging, including, of course, WhatsApp messages, let me reiterate what I have said in the Chamber just a couple of hours ago. Let me unreservedly apologise to this inquiry, but also to those who are mourning the loss of a loved one that was bereaved by COVID for the government's, frankly, poor handling of the various Rule 9 requests in relation to informal messages. There's no excuse for it. We should have done better, and it's why I reiterate that public apology today. That ministers are, and there is awareness amongst ministers, amongst cabinet secretaries, regardless of the medium of communication, that any key decision that is in relation to government business should be recorded in the corporate record, and the salient points recorded on the corporate record, and that's usually done via the private office or via government officials. But I'm afraid for a long time the corporate mindset of the government, the organisational mindset of the government, was because the corporate record had those key decisions and salient points, that was what we had to, that was the only thing really that was required to hand over to the inquiry, when the inquiry made it clear, of course, that you were seeking more than that. And there is a gap, regardless of the records management plan, the mobile messaging policy. There is clearly a gap that exists in relation to how material and informal communication should be retained in relation to a statutory public inquiry. And that's why I've instructed an externally led review to look at this issue and other issues, such as what ministers and cabinet secretaries should do. Should they, for example, change device in the midst, particularly of an emergency such as a pandemic or anything that is analogous to that?
Is it the case that you used your own personal phones, plural, for WhatsApp messages during the course of the pandemic rather than a government-issued phone?
Yes, that's correct.
And I think it has transpired from the material you provided that you in fact had multiple phones over the period from January 2020 to April 2022.
Both personal and government devices, yes.
Yes.
It was done certainly on occasion, and I also occasionally would use voice notes as well.
Were the contents of those voice notes, insofar as relating to significant decisions made in the course of the pandemic or discussions around them, transcribed or copied into the corporate record?
Again, if there were salient points from those voice notes, then they would, and decisions that were made in those voice notes, then of course we would always seek to record them on the public record, on the corporate record.
So you'd say you'd seek to do so, but can you tell me whether that did happen or not?
Again, when so many decisions were made in the course of the pandemic, it would always be the practice that we would seek to do that. Government ministers, cabinet secretaries would seek to do that. If there was occasions when that did not happen, that I would hope would be the very rare occasion, but it should not happen. It should be the case that every single minister, cabinet secretary, myself included, would ensure that those decisions and salient points related to those decisions were indeed on the corporate record.